A Conversation with John Conenna is sponsored in part by Venus Travel Incorporated in Chicago, the agency that has served the Chicagoland area for over 55 years, which is still owned and operated since 1968 by the Conenna family. Again, Venus Travel, the premier agency for over 55 years, is a proud sponsor of A Conversation with John Conenna. And now, on to our episode. Good evening and welcome to another edition of A Conversation with John Conenna. Tonight is a special one for me and for those Chicago Blackhawk fans of the 1960s and those mid to the mid 70s. Tonight, we are thrilled to have on Doug Jarrett Jr., the son of Doug Jarrett, the famous number 4. He started with number 20, but he's the famous number 4. And of course, we'll always remember Doug as the chairman of the boards when growing up here and watching him in the old Chicago Stadium. Doug Jarrett, I truly appreciate you coming on here tonight. And what is going on with you, young man?
Well, thank you for the invitation, John. It's always exciting for me to talk about Dad, and there's a lot of people that remember him, and not too much. Just coming off a week of holidays here, and just relaxing, and was looking forward all week to talking to you.
Oh, thank you so much. This is what a thrill for me when you said yes, for sure. Mm-hmm. So Doug is your dad, of course, is actually born in London, Ontario, correct?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And how far is London from St. Catharines?
It's a couple hours.
Uh-huh.
Yep, good couple hours down the 401, but we made lots of trips back and forth to visit his parents and his brothers and sisters over the years. So a couple hours tops.
Yeah, I had a gentleman friend here that knew him. I coached a lot of high school and travel hockey myself on the amateur level. And there was a gentleman, I think, who might have fished with him. I don't know if you'll know this name. His name was Terry Stasica.
Oh, yes. That name sounds very familiar. Yeah. Would his dad have been Casey?
Yes.
Yeah, I remember Casey. I remember the name. And if I'm 100% sure, I think I am. I think he was at Dad's celebration of life when he passed, because he did make a point of coming up to me and introducing himself.
Yes.
And the name sounds familiar to me.
He ran a high school program here in Illinois, and he had hired me as a coach in early 2000.
Oh, yeah.
Over his program. So I always talked highly about that. So he basically, what amazes me, Doug, is that, I have conversations with my son who played on, let's say, a travel level and a college level. And I would tell him back in the days of, let's say, a Doug Jarrett, there were only 6 teams. Mm-hmm. And to this day, I feel, to make only 6 teams, there was no WHA. You either played in the minors or you played professional hockey. How does it, do you remember how it starts for Dad, how he goes from this, young man in London, Ontario, gets to the level of a St. Catharines, which was the Blackhawks farm team?
Yeah, back in the day, there was no, there wasn't no, like the Ontario Hockey League here is the major junior league. There was no, that I remember, no draft back then. So I think you were basically just, you were found and you were signed, and then you became property of, in this case, it was the St. Catharines Blackhawks. Dad broke in at a time when the St. Catharines team was known as the Teepees.
Yes.
And then in and around that, I think this was probably 61, 62.
Yes.
Then they became directly affiliated with the Blackhawks, and then took the name St. Catharines Blackhawks. So he was a product of London minor hockey. He got found. I don't know who scouted him, but and then he ended up in St. Catharines, and away we go.
And you stole one of my questions, meaning the question I was going to ask you back in those days, because Tommy Ivan had left
Mhm.
Detroit in the late 50s.
Mhm.
And of course, this was the Blackhawks rebuild to get a better coach, a better general manager, because
Mhm.
they were, in the late 50s, they were kind of just floundering. And then, of
Mhm.
course, in 60, 61, they won that 61
Mhm.
season, they won the cup. But I would wonder if it was somebody like a Tommy Ivan who saw Doug Jarrett and,
Mhm.
and got him into the St. Catharines thing.
Yeah, I'm not sure about Tommy Ivan there, but I'm certainly familiar with the name.
Right. He actually has a great career in the OHA, because that's OHA juniors at that time.
Mhm.
And he even makes a little bit of a run there with the Buffalo Bisons in the
Yep.
AHL,
Yep.
and comes up for a not really a cup of coffee. And he comes up in actually with the Blackhawks in 64, 65
Mhm.
for the season. And he gets in 46 games.
Mhm.
And I mean, again, like I was saying, the rivalries of that time, I mean, Chicago, Detroit, Toronto, Montreal, you're playing teams 6-6, 6 in the Chicago Stadium, 6 on the road. And,
Mhm.
it's like you're playing them every other night. So
Right.
you're well noticed, and you got to be a pretty tough guy. And I have to say, I think Dad was what, about 6'1"?
I think he was probably. I think his hockey cards used to say 6'4", but I don't. I think you're probably more accurate. To
Yeah,
be
on the
honest.
6'1".
Yeah,
But
he was heavy though. He was heavy, like well over 200.
yeah, I mean,
100
because
pounds. Yeah.
Dad's born in 44.
Mhm.
And he comes up basically. I mean, he's already got a pro career going by 1960.
Mhm.
Did he ever tell you how this was, like how this was treated? How, because we know how he's noticed and everything, but what he had to go through now to make that professional team here in Chicago. Did he ever take you through that?
Not really. I don't remember talking to him about it. I remember he thought all along that he was going to be a Maple Leaf to begin with.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he thought. I remember him mentioning that quite a few times, that he had Punch Imlach was after him, and so to get to St. Catharines was a bit of surprise and become property of the Blackhawks. But
Right.
as far as back in those days, he played in St. Catharines when you know Bobby and Stan were at the tail end of their junior careers, so they were already on their way up or close to it. But it was certainly in St. Catharines. They had quite a team back then. And most of the guys that I remember, they were just played a couple years junior, maybe a stint in the AHL with Buffalo, and then off to Chicago.
Wow, yeah, which is amazing, for that time period. Like I said,
Hmm.
to be handpicked. I think rosters were only like 17, 18
Yeah,
players.
not like today, no.
No, and of course, then this, I call it the Doug, and maybe you might agree with me. I really feel it's been watered down to the point where, like, wow, here we had 6 teams till
Hmm.
the expansion draft of the St. Louis Blues and
Hmm.
all them, and the Pittsburgh
Hmm.
Penguins. And
Hmm.
then it just kept getting worse in the 70s when
Hmm.
Vancouver and the Flames came.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
does he talk about those early years in Chicago, meaning like this he starts playing full seasons. He's thrown into the ring right away because I think they have an aging Pierre Palat.
Yep.
Their defensive core was getting a little bit old. They had an older Moose Vasco,
Right.
and then they had a gentleman by the name of Matt Ravlich.
Matt Ravlich, I remember.
Yeah, and now
Yep.
Doug is kind of thrown into the fire,
Yep.
and they wind up really having a good team. And a lot of those guys are
Hmm.
on that 66, 67 team when
Hmm.
they had Phil Esposito and
Hmm.
Mackey and Warren.
Hmm.
Does he? It's a famous game here in Chicago that I just watched a whole old episode of it on YouTube where they play the Leafs, the team
Hmm.
that maybe Emlock was coaching the team,
Hmm.
where Sawchuck stands on his head in the old Chicago Stadium
Hmm.
and kind of turns the whole series around. But they were favored to win the 1967 Stanley Cup.
Hmm.
They had this team that was already maybe like 18 points ahead of everybody in the division.
Hmm.
And I really think that's one of his first seasons where he's in there, because I know I looked at some of his stats. he played a full 66 games, I think, that year.
Yeah, which was high for Dad. In the following, years after that, he injuries caught up with him, but 66 games in a season. I don't know if they in those years if they played 81 or 82 games,
Yeah,
but
I think it was right around 65 to 70 games, right? Exactly.
yeah. So that was unusual for Dad to complete a whole season, for sure.
Does he talk about those? I mean, in the sense of the Blackhawks. I mean, did he see the progression with them when he first came up? Did he see like where he was at on that team?
Yeah, you know what? Most of the times we had chatted were about the Stanley Cup series and things like that. But I know he found a nice role on the team moving into Chicago in his first couple years. But he knew that eventually his role would get larger with the team, with Elmer retiring and things like that. So, but they had a stacked team back then, and for a period of 5 or 6 years, they were perennial favorites to win the Stanley Cup. They just couldn't close the deal. That's all.
They couldn't close the deal, right? Not to kind of jump ahead. I want to jump ahead to a season, the 1969-70 season, where they pick up a gentleman. I think you saw the interview on his book, Keith Magnuson, and another gentleman, Cliff Coral, who replaces the great Kenny Warham, and a rookie named Jimmy Wisty. And of course, Glenn Hall had gone a couple of years before this, and they didn't have much goaltending at the time because they had two guys named Dennis DeJordy and Dave Dryden. And at that time, it was suspect goaltending until Tony got here again when Esposito came. That was a year where you really start to see the cohesiveness because Billy Ray puts them with this rambunctious, I'll say it, since Keith is not around anymore, I can get away with this, the rambunctious Keith Magnuson. Did he like being partnered with Keith? Did he like the defensive system? How Billy Ray was showing him this? Those things come up with Doug.
It was a perfect match for Dad because, like you said, Keith was a little bit rambunctious, maybe took a few chances, but Dad, I think, found his role. He was the prototypical stay-at-home guy. He always teased. He always said that it was very rare for him to cross a red line because he was always worried about his own end a lot. And playing with Keith, who was finding his way in the league, I'm sure he maybe got out of position a couple times. So Dad always had his eye out for Keith, and they made a nice pair. They were good friends off the ice too.
I was watching something today, actually a little bit to watch, why he was nicknamed, of course, the chairman of the boards. And it's amazing to watch these old videos because your dad would really line up a guy crossing that center ice and force him to go to the boards. Either you're going to hit me or you're not going to get through the middle here. You're going to get, force it. So talk about, he was that prototypical stay at home defenseman. Was he always a defenseman? Did you know, or did he play offense growing up, just before juniors?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know if he was ever, he played up front, but he was always a defenseman, from, obviously in junior and then up in the pros, but I don't remember him, ever being up front very often. No.
Because he was, in reading about him and of course watching him all those years, he was very good along the boards with the puck. And I figured here's maybe a gentleman that might have been able to get this type of expertise by going into the corners as a forward. So I always wondered about it because as much as he didn't rush the puck up the ice, he was definitely someone who could come out of the corner with the puck.
And then he knew the most important thing was to take care of his own end and then get the puck to the guys that can do something with it, Stan and Bobby and Dennis and those guys.
And all those guys. And that was such a great core with him, of course, Maggie, Pat Stapleton, then we wind up picking up a guy from Los Angeles who was tremendous, like your dad, Bill White.
Those teams were stacked.
those teams were stacked, and
Yeah.
like you said, it's just a shame that we couldn't get over the hump of that.
Yeah,
When
unfortunately, Montreal teams were a little bit more stacked back
Yeah,
then.
I think, yeah, and again, I'm not going to get into the whole Montreal thing, but we will get into a little bit. But it seems like Montreal had something over the league or
Oh
something
yeah, oh
to
yeah,
get
for
these
sure.
crazy picks that they did. Because every time you turned around, how did he wind up over there when he should have
Oh
wound
yeah,
up with the California Golden Seals?
yeah. I hear you. Yep.
They had a way. Were Doug's parents alive when you were younger?
Oh yeah, for sure. Yep. They
Yeah.
made regular trips down to see us in Chicago. Yep. My grandparents were yep, they were very active coming down, or even there's lots of pictures of when the Blackhawks were in Maple Leaf Gardens, they would make the trip from London, which was 2 hour drive.
Yeah.
So they were yeah,
It's
they
not that
were
bad. But again, I had these old-fashioned Italian parents who probably didn't want me to play marbles when I was a kid because they thought
mhm,
I'd get hurt at the kitchen
mhm,
table. Um, do you remember his parents being, because here they have this talented son, Doug
mhm,
Jarrett, who
mhm.
now is going to head off to St. Catharines, have a professional career. Were
Mhm.
they an aggressive part? Were they more conservative, your grandparents? How were
No,
they
I
telling
think
you that Doug was
yeah,
going to make this transition?
yeah, I think they left him on his own to figure out his own way, and I'm sure as any parents they would be supportive of him, but dad kind of did his own business, and he loved the game so much, and he dedicated a lot of time just to find a patch of ice to skate on and things like that. So I'm sure my grandparents were supportive, but as far as pushing him or anything like that, I think my dad looked after that himself.
And which is, that is great to hear in this day and age, because
Hmm.
in this day and age, Doug, I feel like a lot of parents, and of
Hmm.
course, a lot of things that I dealt with over the years
Hmm.
were playing through the eyes of their children and
Oh,
pushing
there's no
them,
question. Yeah, yeah, I
and,
agree with you 100%. Yeah,
and
for sure.
clinics and everything else. Were there, did Doug have any siblings, brothers and sisters?
Yep, he had a brother Charlie and two sisters, Kim and Joanne. Charlie's he's deceased, but Kimmy and Joanne are still around. They live in London.
Uh, did he play hockey?
Charlie?
Yeah.
Yeah,
His,
no, not that I remember. No.
yeah, okay, yeah. So
Yep,
not on the talent of if he did, it wasn't on the
not at
talent
dad's
of
level.
Doug. Yeah, right,
No,
exactly.
no.
So like I said, when I really first truly saw him was in 69, 70, and a little bit, younger. I remember him, and they started to make this transition where now, they're ready to make this run, I felt,
Hmm.
because
Hmm.
in 69, 70, they ran into a Boston Bruin team, which was really stacked at that time with Orr and Esposito and Busick and all them. But the Blackhawks get a big break in 70, 71 when Boston is upset by Montreal in the first round.
Hmm.
And now they're going to play them in that final round. And I just thought there's not a chance, that Montreal will be able to beat Chicago.
Yeah, when Boston got beat out, the path looked a little bit easier, didn't it?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Because now
Yeah,
Tony didn't have to worry about his brother, and the Bruins were a very physical team.
yeah.
Does that first, of course, 67, they lose in the first round, and it was a
Hmm.
totally different, but that 71 game, May 18th, 1971, because
Hmm.
I remember it religiously. Does that, did that game come up over the years as a professional where, like that game that got away?
Yeah, oh, for sure. I mean, it was a topic of conversation regularly. Um, you know, whenever we'd get together and have a few beers, we would always talk about the game and what if, and if if Bobby doesn't hit the crossbar when it's
Right.
2-0, it's a different story. And everybody will remember that the home team held serve in that
Serve.
series, and
Yes.
that was the one and only game where the visiting team won. But
Wow.
it's a different story when you're up 3-0, and then shortly after Bobby hits the crossbar, Lemaire scores from just inside the red line, and it just seemed, in looking back, it just seemed like that was it just deflated the Hawks, and then obviously gave Montreal a little bit of life, and then the rest is history.
And that's it. And I have to tell you, if you go back and look at something like that, your father and those Billy Ray had those 4 defensemen out there constantly and using
Oh yeah,
4. You know, he had
they played.
Stevenson and White, and of course he had Jarrett and Magnuson out there.
Yeah, they played measure minutes, so that game.
Continuously. You know, as the fan looking on, I've talked to my friends over the years, and I would always say, God, I wonder what goes through the mind of a Doug Jarrett or a Stan Mikita about that game. And I really appreciate you elaborating on that, because when you talk to people like, oh, they forgot about it, they're just making millions of dollars. Well, they weren't making millions of dollars
Not back then, no.
to forget about it, you know.
Yeah.
But
I'll tell you a quick funny story about
sure.
that. Over the years, it was a source of pain for Dad, and especially being on the ice for the 3-2 goal by Richard.
Oh.
And he claimed to us that he was not on the ice, and then we actually, you know, with the advancement of YouTube and things like that, we were able to show him that, yeah, Dad, you were on the ice for that goal. So little salt in the wound for him too. But you know what? It is what it is, and it was a source of good conversation. But there was a chance that they could have won the Stanley Cup then. That was as close as they would get, I guess.
Yeah, I have to tell you, I interviewed a guy that. Were you in the Chicago Stadium as a young boy that night?
Not that night, no. Just Mom was. But I was in the stadium a lot of times over the years too, but not to answer your question. No.
And I have to tell you, now, we'll get off the subject of 71, because the more I talk about it, the more I'm losing more hair. But I interviewed JP Bordelot, who was a rookie coming up. He did not play in the game. He was in the press box.
Yeah.
Because you've heard so many things about that 71 game where there was a fog coming off the ice.
Mm-hmm.
Lemaire hit a knuckleball. So I finally has to ask Bordelot the question. I says, JP, when Lemaire shot that puck, was it a floater? I know Tony missed it. He says, John, it was a cannon. It was a cannon. And he goes, probably as hard as Hall's back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
He goes, I think just it caught Tony for surprise.
Oh yeah, for sure, especially from that distance, and maybe the fog had a part of it, but maybe Esposito didn't expect it to hit the net and wasn't ready. But what can you do?
Let's go back to Dad for a second. Over the years, I don't know if you've listened to Dennis Hall, who became like this comedian off the ice.
Well, Dennis and Dad were best friends.
Very close.
Always together. Together.
And he told some stories that I picked up over the years, and that's why I always wanted to talk to somebody about Doug Jarrett, where Dad was notoriously late for practice.
Yep.
And of course, he'd always have every excuse for Billy Ray. He would say,
sure.
I got a flat tire. My wife forgot to give me a set of keys. I couldn't find the keys.
Yeah.
So was he a jokester as much as his demeanor was that he looked like a very conservative, just an easygoing guy?
Oh no, practical joker, always very witty. I mean, I think that's where I got it from, being witty, is from Dad for sure. Oh yeah, he always joking, just a fun-loving guy as far as that concerned. But jokes for sure. He was a big Jackie Gleason fan, so that's where he.
Oh wow! Okay, so king of the one-liners. I mean,
there you go.
And all that kind of thing. There's a great story. I don't even know if you know this. I guess Doug Moans there was a gentleman by the name of Doug Moans.
I know. Yeah, remember.
And they had traded him for Danny O'Shea, but a couple of weeks before that, I guess Moansy had a toupee, and I guess Dad and Dennis put his toupee in a urinal. And
no surprise there.
Yeah, Doug had to wear it out of the Chicago Stadium pretty wet,
Yeah.
At that point, don't wear it at all.
Yeah, but I wouldn't be surprised at that story.
But I mean, his I don't remember this about him, but he was actually an alternate captain for a few years. I mean,
he was.
He wore the A very well, but I really felt that and what's missing nowadays is he had a respect for Billy Ray. And I think Billy Ray, as much as let's say Doug was late for practice, your dad, Ray had a ton of respect for him because he always put dad out in some major situations.
Yeah, yeah. He played in tough situations, played a lot on the penalty kill or against the top line on the other team. But yeah, I would agree with that with the relationship with. I think he knew how to. There was only so far he could go with pushing Billy Ray, and I think he just got to that point and then kind of pushed back or held back a little bit and then wait for the next time. So, but the respect, I agree with that two-way.
Yeah, it was definitely. And you know what is amazing nowadays, Doug? You know, when you see these games, there's two assistants, the main coach. Then for practice, there's a defensive coach, there's a goaltending coach, there's a forward coach, there's a strength coach, there's a guy to show you how to eat and everything else. And so here's Billy Ray dealing with forwards, goaltenders, and defensemen. So this is why I always tell my son, you really had to be the cream of the crop because Billy Ray wasn't going to teach Doug Jarrett how to play defense. Doug Jarrett better come in knowing the game. That's why.
Oh, no question. I agree with that.
The respect. They move on and they had a bad playoff round in 71-72 where they got ousted by the Rangers, which I think shocked Chicago because they had a good season, but there was a little bit of turmoil going on because of this WHA, a lot of rumors flying. And then in 73, they face our friends again, the Canadiens. Does he talk about that series? Could it have been a series of redemption?
Not as much, no. It was the 71 series, and you know what? Out of the two, I don't remember the 73 series as well as I do the 71. So
yeah, the 73 Montreal was definitely, I mean, on paper,
I think that went only 6 games too, if I remember.
Yes, 6 games, and Makita had come off a broken leg, and
did they have who had home ice in that series?
Actually, Montreal did. Yeah, Montreal did, and they took the first 2, and I think they won. They came back 1-1 in Chicago. The Hawks got down 3-1, but definitely the 73 Canadiens were far better than the 73 Blackhawks, without a doubt.
Oh yeah. I think the window by that time the window was starting to close for the Blackhawks. Just with
the window was starting.
Everybody's got an extra year on them, and the WHA stuff starts. So yeah, I think the window is starting to close.
And now, like you said, expansion to WHA. Do you remember when like some of his first injuries started to maybe start the plague in him?
He had I know he had a broken leg once. He broke his fibula, and but he had multiple times he had separated shoulders, probably from obviously
being chairman of the boards, right?
For sure, yeah. The shoulders were an issue. There was a lot of other minor stuff, but the separated shoulders, and he did both probably more than once.
But he was the type to, nowadays, I laugh at some of the athletes here in Chicago. I have a torn nail on my pinky. I'm going to go on the 21 disabled list.
Yeah. Well, back then, it was, it was, there was other guys waiting to take your job. So it wasn't unlike guys to play hurt, really hurt sort of thing.
Right. I mean, you played with a pulled hamstring. You played with. No
question.
Yeah, exactly. That's a great point by you. And thank you for your bringing up. And of course, the style that Doug Jarrett was, he was not going to lose his position as some rookie.
He played. I wouldn't say Dad was a rough and tough guy. I don't think he went looking for trouble. But playing his position called for a little bit more of a physical nature too. So.
Yeah, especially because if you got to go get that puck behind the net to break it out, someone's coming for you. So
for sure. Yeah. You're going to get licked.
How was it for him in the sense of course, like you said, now after 73, we start to see a little bit of the Blackhawks fading. We now start to get some older. Makita's getting older. Dennis Hall's getting older. Pitt Martin's getting older. Jimmy Pappin, they're all getting up there in age. How did he take after all those years? Because I think even in our little phone conversation that I had with you, when after the 74-75 season, they decide to make a trade, correct?
Yeah, that was tough. That was, I remember we in the early years of Dad's career, we would, there was just my mom and my brother Mike and myself. So we would make the trip down for the season, and we would live in Melrose Park
Yes.
for I think it was about 3 or 4 seasons we lived there, and then the family got bigger when we had to get a home. I know we lived in Elmhurst for a while.
Very nice suburb, Elmhurst. Yes, very nice suburb.
Yeah. So yeah, so I'm sorry, what was your question again?
No, when he got traded after the
Oh, with the trade, yeah.
75 season,
Yeah. Yeah,
how
by that
how
time,
hard was that?
yeah, by that time we had made a decision as a family, because at that point there was 5 of us, 5 boys.
Oh,
It
wow.
got a little, yeah, it got a little bit difficult to move everybody down and get them settled. So we decided to stay. By that time, mom and dad had built a house in Niagara Falls, so we moved from St. Catharines to Niagara Falls, which is about 15 minutes down the road. They actually built in 72, so we had been there 3 years, but we decided not to. We were all in minor sports in school, so
Sure.
mom and dad made the decision to stick to just this. Dad would go down and play the season, and then we got the call in October of I guess it would be 75, October 75.
75, yes.
Yeah, that he got traded. And it was my first reaction, I remember it pretty clearly, was that I was a little bit excited. It's a different team, maybe a new opportunity, but it quickly didn't really didn't turn out the way I think Dad had planned. I think his goal, his game plan was probably, finish the finish the career with the Hawks and then move into some sort of maybe a front office position or something like that. So
Sure.
to get traded, I think he was very I think the word would be bitter. I mean, I think his attitude was, I gave 10 plus years of my life to this organization, and this is what I get from it. So, but it was a nasty way to understand the business of the sport anyway.
Yeah, and especially around that time, it starts to change where you use the key word here that it's a business. And
Yeah.
I would look at hockey cards when I was from 1967 to let's say 1975, and you would always find Doug Jarrett in a Chicago Blackhawk uniform.
Yeah.
Now
Yeah.
I don't even know who collects cards anymore because in 3 months somebody's on waivers or traded.
Yeah. Yeah. There's the loyalty is well, I mean, a lot of players are following the money too. So
I want to ask you, and I want to go back to his a little bit of something about his playing. So you don't think at that time after that 75 season, did he see it coming?
the trade?
The trade, yeah. Did he see the trade
Yeah.
coming?
No, I don't think he saw it coming. I don't really remember the origin of the trade. Was there a need? I know Gilles Villemure came back, but what was the Hawks were in trouble in the net or something? Or?
Yeah, we had a goalie backing up Esposito named Mike Visor and Michel Dumas.
Yeah.
And Michel Dumas.
Yeah.
And they weren't just really the backups that I think the organization was looking for.
Right.
So now they really went after a Villemure who basically had seen better days himself.
Yeah.
But I think, and of course, Tony's still playing 65 games.
Yeah.
And Villemure maybe got in 5 or 6. But yeah, I would have to say at that time, I think they just figured, hey, we have something to offer the New York Rangers. And it was Doug Jarrett. Yeah.
So it was more of a reliability thing for the backup for Tony. Yeah. Okay.
But in the New York thing doesn't last long in the sense of him playing.
No, he never really felt at home there. I think, it just, the whole trade kind of caught him off guard. And again, with, spending all of his career in Chicago, I think he figured he was going to end up there and retire there, and we would be there and that sort of thing. So New York, it never got off on the right track. And I think that I don't think I remember ever seeing him smiling when he was in New York at all. We made an effort as a family to move down there shortly after the trade.
Sure.
And that only lasted maybe a couple months, and then we came back to Niagara Falls.
And if anybody knew him, it was his family, to see his emotions, if he was happy or not. I noticed, and I don't want to harp on it, I noticed that he played for the New Haven Nighthawks in the AHL. Was that just to be rehabilitation for the Rangers?
I'm sorry?
Was that to was he coming off an injury and he was just trying to get in shape?
Yeah, I don't know. I think maybe it was a numbers game too. You
Yeah,
know, coupled with going to New York and just his bitterness with the trade. That's
sure.
when that's when, if I remember correctly, that's when he started having troubles with his back,
I got you.
that's basically what ended his career.
Sure.
And the trips down to New Haven might have been like rehab assignments or something
Rehab.
like
Besides what I
that.
thought when I saw, because I think they were
Yeah.
part of it. So after this unbelievable career that he had, because it was, I mean, he had a great career. You don't last, and especially in that era, you don't last as long as he did if you're not a good player or a great
Mhm.
player. I mean, I always tell people, you could, I love when people are watching something on a television and say, "Oh my God, this guy's terrible. This guy's terrible." Do you want to get out there? Do you
Yeah.
think this is an easy thing in front of
Mhm.
30,000 people and
Mhm.
you got to make decisions? You got to get on a plane, you have to fly, you have to do this, you have to go on a road, you're away from your family. People don't realize this life. How was life after hockey for him in the sense of, I noticed he got involved with the Blackhawk alumni a little bit.
He did. It took him a while to get back there, but I think if I had to sum it up for Dad, it was um, the bitterness of the trade from New York, and then the subsequent retirement, and he just became he just became a very I almost thought at the point of angry. Just things didn't go the way he had planned, and the subsequent years after his retirement. The thing is, Dad retired when he was only about 33, 34 years old,
Right.
and back then those guys didn't have a lot to rely on, and they didn't make a lot of money. So here's my dad at 33 years old with five sons and a mortgage with nothing to do. There's no. So I think the one thing I remember talking to Dad not too long before he died was, he told me that, and I'll never forget this. He goes, Doug, I went from somebody to nobody overnight, and that's basically in a nutshell. And he struggled with that. I mean,
Sure.
the life of a pro athlete, John, it's celebrity, and then when that's taken away, and you have to become regular Joe. I mean, that Dad really struggled with that.
But I got to tell you, Doug, and this is man to man, me for you. To hear this tonight is surprising in the sense of this.
Yeah.
This man, I mean, listen, I do this podcast, of course, as a part-time thing because I have
Hmm.
my family as a travel agency.
Yeah.
But people say to me, "How do you pick your guests?" I go, "I pick people that I want to interview, not something like, oh, I'm going to try to interview so and so or that." Somebody, he was something, and he ended up with something because people here in Chicago, I have to tell you, when
Hmm.
I told people this past week that I was going to interview you, his son, they were like, "Holy cow, you're going to interview Doug Jarrett, number 4?" Because this is still a big hockey base here.
Hmm.
And the guys my age, they all were like, "We cannot wait for this to come out to hear, a little bit about." But I can understand what you're saying when you have 5 children. And just like all of us, the stresses of every day, a
Yep.
mortgage, bills, and everything else.
Yep.
Did he stay involved in some capacity hockey or no? Was there any kind of coaching at a minor league level or
Yeah, he
anything?
did. Yeah, yeah, he did. It was. So I'm just trying to go back in the years, 77, probably early 80s. He got involved with Niagara Falls minor hockey, and
Nice.
he was approached, the junior B team there. Um, they had lost their coach earlier in the season, and then the owners had reached out to Dad to maybe finish the year, which he did, and he I think he did another year after that. But even before the junior Bs, he coached major midget.
Oh
He
wow.
was approached to do that. So I think all in all, he probably did about 3 or 4 years in the coaching, in either at like a major midget level or a junior B level.
And he did stay in touch with a lot of the old players from the Hawks.
Yeah, it took him a little while to kind of get over um, the whole New York trade and the years in New York and the retirement and then the adjustment. And we would like all my brothers, we would always encourage them to, don't burn bridges and things like that. I mean, people are reaching out to you, and I think it's important for you to, become involved with the Hawks. It took them a while to kind of come around. I think, the whole end of his years in Chicago, they weighed on him a lot, and I think he had the attitude for a while that, I don't owe them anything, so.
Sure.
You can understand that, but he kind of softened up as he got older.
Yeah, without a doubt, I'm one of those guys that does totally, because when you put in your time and the way he played, he was a great defenseman. I mean, I have to be honest with you. I don't know if you had watched the Chicago Blackhawks during the 2010, 2015 runs that they had.
Oh, no, for sure.
Yeah. I have to tell you, what's eerie, and it's goosebumps every time I watch the two of them. The other number 4, Mr. Nicholas Jarmison, reminded me it was an homage to your father.
Mm-hmm.
He played the style of your father and wore that number 4. And I would tell people, when we were watching a game with a bunch of buddies, and if they're in that rounds against Philadelphia, Boston, and Tampa, I would say, this guy reminds me of Jarrett.
Yeah.
Because he was that stay-at-home defenseman, blocking shots, taking it for the team. And it just amazed me, and he wore that same number as Dad.
What's Dad's been gone from Chicago since '75, so even to this day, if we're watching the Hawks and I see, well, who's 4 now? Seth Jones?
Yes, Seth Jones was 4. Yes, Seth Jones.
Yeah, it's all the people that wore 4 over the years. Like you said,
well, Bobby Orr wore 4 for about a month.
Yeah.
So
Dad said he thought that number was retired and they should have given it to Orr anyway. So.
Yeah, but Doug Jarrett, I played a lot more games. If they're going to retire, it's got to be Doug Jarrett.
But even to this day, when we watch the Hawks and I see number 4 in years past, it's tough not to think of that. Or think of Dad not wearing that jersey yet.
Real quick tidbit. Why he came up as number 20, right?
Right.
What was the change from 20 to 4?
Good question. I don't think I know the answer to that.
Okay. Yeah, I was wondering. And somebody told me that how defensemen had lower numbers and, back in those days. Or
the only thing I can think of, John, is I don't know. Nowadays, the kids, when they come up, they were like the new kid you guys got now, Bedard, he's got 98 now. So, I mean, unheard of the numbers that the kids wear now. But I think they put everybody in order, like so number 1 when Dad played, it was Gary Smith. He wore number 1.
Gary Smith wore 1.
Probably one of the many ones that wore number 1. And then 2 was Bill White, and then 3 was Maggie, and then 4 Dad, and then 5 was Phil Russell.
Boy, you know
him. Gotti, Martin, Pappen, Hull, Danny O'Shea, and then and on. So, but maybe it was just a natural order thing. I don't know.
Yeah, well, it could have been a natural order thing. No, for sure. Well, listen, I really appreciate you coming. I mean, your time is. I know you have things. I want to ask you one last question. The brothers, meaning even you, did you guys play a little bit of hockey on the?
We did. Yeah, we all grew up through the Niagara Falls minor hockey system, and even the years we were in Chicago, my brother Mike and I played in Oak Park.
Sure, original Commons.
Yeah, Oak Park. We played in Oak Park, so we've got good memories of that. But we all played. We played hockey in the winter. Dad encouraged us to do different things, not hockey 12 months of the year, and on the ice 25 hours a day sort of thing too. He had a big thing about getting away from the game for a while and then appreciating it a little bit more too. So
exactly, because now I feel there's so much burnout with this now, Doug, with parents and everything else that. Yeah, you played 6 months out of the year, and I remember a guy in my neighborhood saying, "Put on a baseball glove, go catch some fly balls," or
I think you appreciate the game more if you step away from it a little bit too.
You got it. Well, listen, I want to thank you, and I want to leave you with this because I always kind of end it with something really of how I feel, or I'll ask you. But like it says, in talking to people in Chicago, I have to tell you, I don't know what it is, but it's that first impression. And I can't get over the first impression of the late 60s, early 70s, whether it's the Chicago Blackhawks, whether it's the Chicago Cubs, the White Sox, the Bears. You don't get over that first impression. And I'm always comparing a Jarrett or a Magnuson or an Esposito to the next guy that comes in. But I have to tell you, your dad, for me, left a lasting impression in my mind of that prototypical hockey player that played the game the right way. And Doug Jarrett Jr., I truly appreciate you coming on tonight to talking about your legendary father, Doug.
Well, thank you very much. It was nice for you to invite me, and I always enjoy talking about Dad. And let me just add one thing.
Sure.
I just want to offer my condolences to the Wirtz family on the passing of Mr. Wirtz.
Yeah.
I don't remember ever meeting was it Bill Wirtz?
Rocky Wirtz.
Yeah, who was Rocky's dad?
Rocky's dad was Bill Wirtz, right?
Bill Wirtz, yeah. So, and he owned the team when Dad played, I guess, eh?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well,
so
his father was Arthur M. Wirtz when
Arthur Wirtz, yeah.
Arthur Wirtz, and then Bill took it from Arthur, and then Bill died about 10 years ago. But Rocky was a young man here at 70 years old, but
yes.
Ill-fated things going on in his life. But yeah, he turned around an organization that was in the early 2000 fledgling until we got Kane and Taze.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, good years.
Doug, we'll get this out to everybody to see, and I really, truly thank you for tonight.
Yeah, thanks. Nice talking to you.
You too, sir. You too.
See you.
Good night, everyone.